Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, where today we're going to hear more from Gary Pepper in this episode of Signed, Sealed, Remembered, Destined to Ride Young. But before we get there, before we hear the voices from the archive today, some of the things we're going to hear about are the trailers. The trailer homes that Elvis bought his friends. And we've heard about the trailers before, but we're going to hear a whole lot more about them. But Elvis loved them. And one of the things he loved is what I named this song that I wrote about those trailers that he bought for his friends. And he loved the fact that they were a house on wheels.
He rode past Green Acres with a glimmer in his eye. Said, wouldn't it be something if my folks could live nearby? 12 trailers later, they were rolling down the lane. Concrete dreams and carpet floors, love poured out like rain. He bought one for Grandma, parked it close to his own. Said, you've got two homes now, no need to be alone. One for his daddy, one for his boys. He built a little kingdom, not just for show, but joy. They called it trailer trash, he called it home. A place for the weary, the lost, and the lone. He fought through the permits, the neighbors, the noise, just to give peace to his mama and joy to his boys. It wasn't steel and wheels, it was love made bold. A house on wheels with a heart of gold. The county said no, the neighbors raised Cain, but Bernie worked midnight through thunder and rain. They poured the pads, ran the lines, made it right, while Elvis rode a rising sun at first morning light. Some said he was foolish, some said he was grand, but he just wanted laughter to echo through the land. He sat on the floor near tears in his eyes, said, why do they fight me when I'm trying to rise? They called it trailer trash, he called it home. A place for the weary, the lost, and the alone. He fought through the permits, the neighbors, the noise, just to give peace to his mama and joy to his boys. It wasn't steel and wheels, it was love made bold. The house on wheels with a heart of gold. They called it trailer trash, she called it home. A place for the weary, the lost, and alone. He fought through the permits, the neighbors, the noise, just to get peace to his mama and joy to his boys. It wasn't steel and wheels, it was love made bold. A house on wheels with a heart of gold.
Thank you for gathering. This is Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And the first echo we're going to hear today is from the guy that you can see on the screen, and that's Gary Pepper. Welcome, Keith. Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for coming, Marion. I appreciate seeing you all here. And so, one of the things that Gary Pepper has to tell us today is that he was asked, and we had talked about this in an earlier episode when we talked about nicknames that Elvis went by, and he had taken to calling people Chief, and eventually they gathered a guy into the group named Chief. And a lot of the guys maybe called him by something else, and I had said that it changed from time to time, but that there was this one name that he really didn't like that much. And somebody asked Gary Pepper, do close friends of Elvis call him L, which is E-L, the beginning of his name, L. And Gary Pepper says no. This name was given him by Judy Spreckles, a friend, in his early career. We never hear him called that by his family or close friends. His dad, grandmother, and all his relations call him Elvis. Sometimes some of the boys who work for him call him E or EP. And Pat says she loves the music, and Marion too. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate that. And somebody asked Gary, how many maids does Elvis employ at Graceland? And he said there was 4. And then he named them for us. So yesterday we saw that Gary was able to name all 17 horses that were in Elvis's barn. And it stands to reason that if Gary knows the names of the horses, he knows the name of everybody at Graceland. And he's probably friends with most of them. And so he tells us the names of the maids. And one name is Daisy Mae Williams. She's a day maid. And there's Mary Jenkins. She's a day maid too. There's Pauline Nicholson. And she's a night maid. And if you're following The Mystery of August 16th, 1977, our other series, Pauline's made an appearance because she made a call from the house. Now, there's other people that say Pauline wasn't there. But that's for the other series, and we'll get back to that real soon. Just as soon as we ride off the Circle G. But right now, Elvis says we've got to finish this story. Hi, Lorna. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Hi, Terry. Appreciate seeing you too. And the 4th maid that works for Elvis, at least according to Gary, is Hattie McDaniels. And she is the night maid, and she's the personal maid for Elvis's grandmother, Minnie Mae. And Gary also notes that the maids also serve as cooks. So the cooks and the maids, they're all the same people. These 4, Daisy Mae Williams, Mary Jenkins, Pauline Nicholson, Hattie McDaniels. So when Elvis is not at the ranch, and he's back at Graceland, he's home from California, the people who are cooking his food are those 4. And Pat is asking, who is the guy next to Elvis? Well, Pat, this is a picture of Elvis while he was filming Flaming Star. And that is Gary Pepper, who Elvis loves very much. Gary and Elvis met at Graceland on Christmas Eve, 1957, because Gladys had invited Gary and his mother and his father to celebrate Christmas with them that night. And Elvis had never met Gary before, But Gary had bought Elvis a very lovely leather white Bible with Elvis's name embossed on front in gold. And he gave it to Elvis, and it touched Elvis's heart. Elvis had recently put out a gospel album, and he had some promotional copies, and he signed one for Gary and gave it to him as his gift for Christmas, because Elvis didn't know Gary was coming. And he didn't know that that Bible was the foundational stone of a lifetime friendship. They were friends for the rest of Elvis's life. And Elvis hired Gary's dad to work as a gate guard at Graceland. Gary's dad wore the EP on his shirt. He was one of Elvis Presley's guys. He was trusted because he was trusted to protect the family and to protect Graceland. And eventually, Gary lived in the house that's next to Vernon's on Dolan Drive. And Gary was confined to a wheelchair. And Gary, he didn't actually write these items himself, like his mother or his nurse would assist him. But he would compose these messages, these articles, and his dad and his mother would help him take pictures, and he would send these articles to different fan magazines. He once ran a fan magazine while Elvis was in the Army. It's called The Tankers. Gary is not alive today. He's been gone for quite a while. He was afflicted with, I believe it was cerebral palsy. And I had seen somebody the other day say he died in 1980. I'm not exactly sure of the date. But if you go and look at Ashley, Adventures with Ashley on her channel, she does a lot of Gary stuff. And I think she has one video that kind of summarizes his entire life. And she's talked to the woman who cared for Gary, who was his nurse at the end, and who ended up with a lot of Gary's stuff. And there's like a whole story about Gary's stuff, which is, we'll eventually see some pieces that Gary had. They're pretty amazing. Elvis gave a lot of stuff to Gary. Elvis really trusted Gary. These articles that end up in the fan magazines, they are basically direct communications from Elvis, because Gary quotes Elvis in some of them. And those are things that Elvis didn't tell these to Gary in private. You know, he told them to Gary to be publicized within the fan magazines as an unfiltered way to reach the fans. You know, that he doesn't go through the Colonel for this. He doesn't go through anybody else. He gives these words to Gary, and he knows that Gary's going to put them into these magazines. And if there's things that he doesn't want in the magazines, he tells Gary, don't do this, don't do that. He trusts Gary. And Pat's saying, is that why he was in the wheelchair, was the cerebral palsy? Exactly. He was born with it. He was like that his entire life. And so he had a lot of difficulty even talking. But Elvis understood what he was saying. And I think it's because Gary and Elvis shared something that was very special. And it's that there were two people in the world that were more important to Gary than anybody else. And one of them was his father, and the other one was his mother. And that reflected exactly how Elvis felt about the world. Most important person in the world to Elvis was his mother. And the most important person in the world to Elvis after his mother, and without his mother, was his father. And we're going to see some of that in today's stories. That Vernon wasn't this guy that just stood on the sidelines. He was involved in the action with the mafia, with the Memphis Mafia. He was right in on all of it, sharing the fun. And he was having fun with them. But he was also the responsible father figure that later had to figure out how to pay for everything and make all the books come out correctly. And it would get to irritating him. And some of the boys would do things that, like any boy does, would irritate a father. And that was kind of Vernon's role within the group. And Gary loved Vernon, and Vernon loved Gary. This was another relationship that's rarely seen. But Vernon knew all about Gary, and that Elvis cared for him deeply. And so when we see words come from Gary, we can really rely that they're basically the truth. He gets a few facts incorrect. He had a fact wrong about where Alan went to high school, Alan Portis, but he didn't really know Alan that well. He's friends with Elvis. He's not part of the Memphis Mafia. He's a personal friend outside of that circle, although he does mix into it from time to time. And Pat's saying that Vernon wasn't fond of the guys of the Memphis Mafia. So I don't think that's as true as people think it is either. I think it's just that he was generationally apart. You know, he was an older man, and he didn't really get along with all of their shenanigans, but he lived in a very small house with Red and Lamar for like a year and a half while they were in Germany. And he did it prior to that while they were in Texas. So he definitely could tolerate the guys, whether he was fond of them or not. Yeah, that's definitely a different question. And Lorna says that Vernon didn't trust them either. I would definitely say at the end of his life that was absolutely true. He didn't trust them when they first came into their groups either. I think he grew to trust some of them, and I think some of them shattered that trust, and then he became extremely suspicious of everyone after that. He keeps saying, Marty, watch out. And Marty kind of had a thing about Vernon. And I think Marty himself thought that he was smarter than Vernon. And so it irritated Marty that Vernon got to run the books, the big books, but Marty didn't get to run those. And Terry's saying that Gary, he had a very good friend in Elvis, which he absolutely did. And he was a good friend to Elvis. And Linda's saying, hi, Matt, and all beautiful people. Hi, Linda. Thank you so much. Appreciate seeing you here. Let's get back to this story. So the maids, we've named them all. They've been honored and described as both the caretakers and the cooks. They were the ones taking care of the house, taking care of business. And they formed the quiet backbone of Graceland's daily rhythm. And their dual roles, it's often overlooked. We think of a maid or we think of a cook, but they're taking care of it all. They're taking care of Elvis. Now we've got a voice we haven't heard. We haven't heard it in the archive yet. Suddenly it pops forth. And it's got some things to tell us about this time, just before the Circle G, how we get to the Circle G. And this is Red West. And he says, well, it started off with Elvis buying Priscilla a horse. She didn't have anyone to ride with. So Elvis bought his cousin, Patsy Presley, a horse so she could ride with her. And then he bought himself one. And then he saw us looking on forlornly at them riding horses. And he decided we should all have horses. He bought every one of us a horse. For the first time, Red has now told us that Elvis didn't buy Sandy, who is Jerry's girlfriend at the time, a horse next. He bought Patsy Presley, his cousin, one, so that she and Priscilla could ride together. That's a slightly different story than we've heard before. Hi, chillin' in Canada. Thank you so much for joining. Appreciate seeing you here. So instead of the way that Jerry Schilling told it, Red says, no, it was Patsy Presley. Now, he doesn't know when he tells this story, the story that Jerry Schilling's going to tell, because Jerry Schilling tells his story 25 years later. This story was in 1976 because this story's out of his book, Elvis, What Happened? So there are true stories in this book, and they're interesting because this is before anybody else had their say. And in this story, Red doesn't have anything to gain by saying it was Patsy Presley or Sandy. He just doesn't mention Sandy or Jerry. It just says it was Patsy. But nobody else has said it was Patsy. And I kind of believe Red here and feel like he's re-entered her into the archive. And maybe that's why Gary didn't list Priscilla's horse as third. Maybe he listed Patsy's, although that doesn't really jive with this story either. So I don't know about that either, but I just find it incredibly interesting that Patsy. So Red comes out of the archive and says something, and now we have Patsy has entered the story. Patsy is Elvis's double first cousin. She is the daughter of Vester Presley, who is Vernon's brother. She is also the daughter of Cletus Smith, who is married to Vester and who is Gladys Presley's sister. So Gladys and Vester used to date, and Vernon and Cletus used to date. Cletus is younger than Gladys. Vernon is younger than Vester. And at some point, they all looked at each other and they said, hey, you guys all want to switcheroo because this isn't working out as it is, but it seems like there's something good here. Now, we don't really know what happened, but what we do know is Vernon and Vester swapped sisters and married them, and they were with them for the rest of their lives. So somehow it all worked out, and it's an amazing story, but that's who Patsy is. And that's who Elvis has bought the horse for. And now we have another new voice that's going to enter the archive. And Pat says that she wishes that she knew Elvis when he was alive so that she could have rode horses with him. And wouldn't it be great if they had an exhibit at Graceland now where you could ride one of the horses? They have horses there. They save horses that have been, they wouldn't be alive otherwise, basically, if they weren't kept there at Graceland now. And I actually met, and I don't know her name because I'm so terrible with names, but the last time I was at Graceland a couple of years ago, I was in the meditation garden, and I was randomly talking to a person, and they happened to see another person that I didn't know nearby, older lady, and she came over and started talking to us. She used to run the stables at Graceland until like the year before, from the time that they had been reopened. So she was really interesting to talk to for a few minutes. But there is definitely a thriving stable program at Graceland right now. I don't think any of those horses are rideable because of the different physical conditions they've all had. But it brings up again things that could be done out at the Circle G, where you've got a lot of undeveloped property. We've got Linda agreeing she'd like to go out on those horses too. And Pat says it sounded like there was so much fun and full of life when Elvis was alive. Yeah, it certainly seems like he was trying to fill his life as full of fun as possible, including for all those around him. And this new voice that we're about to hear from, well, this is Sonny West. And he says, well, and Sonny, so we didn't talk really about who Red was. I just kind of assume everybody knows. Probably shouldn't assume that. Red West went to high school with Elvis. There's a famous story about how Red saved Elvis in a bathroom. And I'd love for us all to look at that story one of these days. I think it's been misinterpreted for a long time. But Red did help did come to the rescue in a high school bathroom. For some guys were going to shave Elvis's hair, cut it all off. Red was a year behind Elvis in high school. And once Elvis hit it big and regionally, like in 1955, and he's driving everywhere, and these drives are so long and tiring, and they start to squabble inside the car. There were now 4 of them, Elvis and Scotty Moore and Bill Black and DJ Fontana. Well, they're squabbling all the time, and they're getting on each other's nerves. And the 3 kind of feel like if Elvis wasn't in the car, probably get along a lot better. Now, they never come out and say that within their books, but it's implied like over and over that Elvis is the one that's creating the chaos in the car. And he has these certain habits, which, may be chaotic. So I'm not saying that anything to say it's not true. It's just, I find it amusing that what ends up happening is Elvis hires Red, and Red begins to drive him around. And if you'd like to hear the story about the very first time Red drives him around, it coincides with the very first Elvis Presley tribute artist performance. And Elvis is there on stage with that tribute artist, and he's a friend of his. And you can find that story out on the Ultimate Elvis Facts channel. It's called Ultimate Elvis Facts, where Diana does a whole lot of fan interviews. And she interviewed me, and I told a few stories. So if you like that story and want to hear more about it, you can find it out there. And Keith says if he had the cash, he'd put a lot of money into reinventing the Circle G. And Chillin in Canada agrees it's a beautiful property. And Pat says that there should be a way for fans to help out. And Linda's hoping Keith will win the lottery so we can make this happen. And here's what Sonny West said. Oh, well, we've already looked at that. No, we looked at Red. Sonny, I needed to introduce. I introduced Red, went to high school with Elvis. He began driving Elvis in 1955. He was very close friends with Elvis until Elvis terminated him from employment in 1976. And then Red wrote a book, Elvis What Happened. A lot of people know about that. Sonny was Red's cousin. And the first time Sonny actually met Elvis was at Graceland when Elvis was there when Gladys passed away. So Red brought Sonny. I believe Gladys was at the house. Her body was being viewed. And that's the day that Elvis met Sonny. But Elvis didn't really remember Sonny from that day. And why would he? He had other things going on. And Sonny understood that he didn't remember him from that day. But Sonny remembered that he was impressed with how Elvis carried himself through his despair. And about a week later, because Elvis stuck around for about a week and a half, 2 weeks in Memphis after his mother passed away, in order that they could get the funeral and all the arrangements made. And then he was going to have to report back to the army, and then they were going to ship him almost immediately over to or soon they were going to finish his training and then ship him over to Europe. So while he's there during that period, Sonny meets him again at a roller rink. Elvis would rent the entire skating rink at night, and then they would have all these games, and one of them was war. And that's where you roller skate at each other as hard as you can and try to knock each other down. It's like bumper cars with no bumper cars. There's no cars. It's just you and the roller skates. And there was a very large woman that was playing with them, a young girl, basically, a very large young lady. And she gave Sonny the eye. She made it clear he was her target, and she took him down. And he was rather surprised because he thought he was going to be able to stand his own. But he had the stars spinning and everything, just like in the cartoons. And he got back up. He said, he's ready to go at it again. And when the whistle blew, she took him down again. Took him down hard. And he told her that he could admit when he'd been beaten, but that he'd be ready for a rematch at some point. And Elvis was very impressed with the way that Sonny handled himself during this loss to a female in this competition of physical prowess. And he felt like Sonny would be a guy he'd like to have hanging around. And things grew from that later when Elvis returned from the army. And he ended up hiring Sonny in 1960. So Sonny was with him for the rest of his life too, well, until 1976, when he also got terminated along with Red and Dave Hebler. And then they all ended up writing the book, Elvis, What Happened? But that's who Sonny West is, who's about to tell us some things. And Terry's saying that he gave the stream a thumbs up. Thank you so much, Terry. Pat says she did too. If everybody could, if you're having fun, if you like this stream, if you've learned things, feel free to give me a thumbs up, subscribe, hit that notification button so that YouTube might tell you when I'm on live. They might tell you when I put up a new video, but you want to probably check back on your own because YouTube's not good about it. And it's every day right now. I'm going live, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. When is that? That's right now. 24 hours from now, we'll all be back here sharing more Elvis stories. More about the Circle G, because I've just got so much more about the Circle G. More than anybody's ever told you about the Circle G ever in any book or magazine or TV show or film. Most books have less than 3 pages about the Circle G. And we're already over 10 hours. And we have learned all kinds of new stuff that you haven't seen in books or anywhere else. So now's a great time to subscribe and tell everybody that you know that loves Elvis all about Hillbilly Cat history so they can learn everything that we're learning and come share the live broadcast with us. And here's what Sonny West had to say. He said right before Christmas of 1966, Elvis bought Priscilla a 4-year-old black quarter horse called Domino. Because Graceland had an old stable, tack room, and hayloft out back, the horse was quartered right on the grounds. Priscilla spent several afternoons riding Domino and started in on Elvis to join her. First, he demurred, and he bought horses for his cousin, Patsy Presley, and Jerry Schilling's fiancée, Sandy Coelho, which is Kawelo, in hopes that their company would be enough for Priscilla. Then one day, Elvis took a ride on Domino, and he was hooked. Couple new things here that Sonny's revealed. One is that he agrees with Red that Patsy Presley, she's the first one that got a horse after Priscilla, was Domino, and then it was Patsy Presley's horse. And then Jerry Schilling's fiance, and he names the last name for Jerry Schilling's fiance, which we have not seen before in this story. And we also see that Elvis went out there and got on the horse, and then he was hooked. And that horse's name was Domino. And so it's kind of like Elvis knocked over a domino, and all the others kept on falling. If you've ever seen a big line of dominoes set up, one of those impressive super feats where they've got all the dominoes and they hit one and they all fall, maybe spell out something or make designs. That's what Elvis has done. He knocked over his own domino, and it results in the Circle G. And Linda's saying that she loves the stories on the Circle G and didn't know much about it at all. So I'm glad I could bring some of these to you. I think most people don't. And Pat's agreeing that she didn't know much about it either. And Keith's asking about the Stanley brothers and if they got a horse. I don't know. I mean, we saw them in a picture the other day, but they're pretty young. So they probably got to ride whatever horse they wanted to ride, but I don't think they had their own horse. But I don't know. Especially once they got to the Circle G. I don't know, they had a lot more room, right? And it's very possible Vernon might have told him, hey, this one's your horse, this one's your horse. And Pat said, wonders if Lisa rode horses a lot. And so when Lisa was old enough to ride, I'm not sure he had all the horses there, although I know he still had Rising Sun and such. That's a very interesting question. That's one that really should be asked to Danny Smith, probably. And I don't know that I've ever heard him address the horses or the barn. You know, and now that we know from yesterday that there was a carpeted room inside the barn, I wonder if they ever played in there. Because I've never ever heard of that carpeted room inside the barn ever before, other than from Gary. And Gary said it, so he had to have been in there. He had to have seen it. It had to be true. And Terry's saying that that's what makes these live streams unique, unseen images and unheard stories. Thank you so much, Terry, because I know you've looked at a lot of stories and images. And Chillin in Canada is saying that Google says yes, Lisa Marie rode horses often as part of her childhood, which included horseback riding at summer camp and at Graceland, and she considered it a healing activity. And that's an interesting point because these horses are acting for Elvis as emotional catalysts. He doesn't just buy these horses. He's giving each of these people a gift of motion, the ability to keep up with him, because now he's on the horse and he's riding it fast. And if you want to be part of the group, now you have to be able to keep up. And he gifts you that motion, that speed, that ability to stay with him. And he starts with Priscilla, and then he goes to Patsy, and then he brings in all of the inner circle. And the act of riding becomes a communal rite, a way to tether their relationships to each other and to the land, to Graceland itself. But it's not big enough. So he's got to move it to a place that's bigger. Graceland's not big enough to handle their community, their commune. And then Gary Pepper tells us something about Christmas of 1966. So Sonny was just telling us about horses at Christmas. But Gary's going to tell us something else. And here we can see a picture of Gary next to Elvis. But here we see a picture of what Gary's going to tell us about. And Gary says, here's a pic of ugly old me and my beautiful Chevrolet Impala convertible, which Elvis gave me for Christmas. So Christmas 1966, as Elvis is given horses, the gift of motion to everybody else. Well, Gary can't ride a horse. And he gives him this beautiful car. And this isn't a Cadillac. Because, like we've heard from Charlie, not everybody can afford to maintain a Cadillac. It causes a burden when they have a luxury car. So a Chevrolet is better for Gary. And it's what he needs. But it's still fancy because it's a convertible. It's still Elvis style. It's not just any old car. And it's just for Gary. And you can see Gary here in it. And of course, Gary can't drive it himself, but Gary can ride in it. And now he too can keep up with Elvis. Pat says Elvis was so giving, you don't find many people like him. He was just a wonderful man. And Linda says that when Elvis found a passion, he took everyone with him. And that he gave experiences of a lifetime to everyone. That's right. Including right here with Gary. And looking at this picture, there's a house in the background. And I'm wondering where this picture was taken. I'm wondering if it was in Gary's driveway. And that's the house across the street. Because Gary's like on a corner. But I don't know. I'd have to go there and take a look now, but there's always extra clues in these pictures if you look close enough. Because they're really the original documents. They're the source material. They're what we're talking about on signed, sealed, remembered. Sometimes it's not a document you wrote on. Sometimes it's a snapshot you took. And I believe Gary's father took this picture. Now here's another picture. And Gary, I believe Gary's father took this picture as well. And Gary says, a pic of Elvis's limousine, which Colonel Parker gave Elvis for Christmas. And as you can see, it is parked in front of Graceland. So Colonel Parker, well, you got to buy the man that's got everything a gift. So he gave him the one thing he knew he didn't have. This particular model Cadillac limousine. Pretty sure it's Cadillac. It's pretty long, huh? And this is a car that I know Elvis liked it. That wasn't really his style for driving, but it was his style for being driven around it. So Christmas in 1966, Elvis gets a car from the Colonel, and Gary gets a car from Elvis. And Marion's saying that she has great experiences with Elvis, even though she never met him. Because we're having experiences like this right now as we learn about the Circle G and how Elvis got there. Keith's saying that this limo is JFK style. Yeah, that's fairly accurate. Only this one's enclosed. This is not a convertible. Laura's saying it's a beautiful car. Linda says that Elvis gives everyone hope and faith in life and in people. And then Gary's got something else to tell us. It was Christmas. And now, a little bit of time's gone by. We're kind of deep into January. Gary says, at this time, I wish to tell you of another death in Elvis's family. The husband of Elvis's aunt on his dad's side, Mrs. Delta Mae Biggs, died recently and was buried here. Mrs. Biggs now makes her home at Graceland and shares her mother's quarters with her. And by mother, Gary's referring to Grandma Minnie Mae Dodger. If you'd like to write her a sympathy note, just send it to Graceland, 3764 Highway 51 South. Note, Mrs. Biggs' husband was buried at the same cemetery as Elvis's mother, which is Forest Hill Cemetery, Memphis, Tennessee. So Gary is announcing to all the fans through the fan magazines that Elvis's beloved Uncle Pat has passed away. Now, he doesn't name Uncle Pat by name because nobody knows who Uncle Pat is. But what we've got to remember is that Gary is Elvis's direct line of communication with the fans. Unfiltered. A look at Elvis in nearly a raw form, further away from the image and closer to the man. So when Gary sends out this message that Uncle Pat has passed away, even though he doesn't name him, and he only names his relationship to the Presley family, this is Elvis mourning his uncle and wanting Pat to be remembered by many more people than ever knew Pat. People Elvis knew would and could not remember Pat's name, but they would remember that he was Elvis's uncle. And it turns it into a ritual of remembrance that transcends biography. It's not about who Pat was to the world. It's about who Pat was to Elvis. And by invoking Elvis's uncle, the mourning has now become communal. Elvis has shared his grief with his fans, the ones who say that they want to know him. Fans who never met Pat, who never heard his name, but they're still invited to grieve with Elvis. And this is a mythic act of emotional generosity. It's symbolic intimacy. Elvis is saying, you may not know his name, but you know me. And because he was mine, he matters to you, too. And Elvis turns Graceland not into just a home, but a shrine for his lost loved ones, like Pat. And like Alan's father, who we saw yesterday had passed away. And both times, Gary has announced it to the world, to the fans. And he's offered to the fans, you can send your sympathy here to Graceland. We'll get the cards to the right people. We've got the manpower to do it. And so Elvis is gathering sympathy for his lost loved ones from the whole world. And all of these fans are invited to share in Elvis's grief without proving credentials of any kind. They don't have to show they've been a fan forever. They don't have to buy a ticket. All they've got to do is have love for Elvis. He said, if you love me, weep with me now for my loss, for my uncle, for Alan's father. And those are the kind of messages that Gary was sending out. You don't see the Colonel sending out those messages. Vernon's not announcing them. But Gary is. Gary's taking care of the fans. And he's making sure that what Elvis wants to be heard gets heard. We've also got this note that Delta is now living not just at Graceland, but she's in Dodger's room. She's living with her mother in a shared room. They're in a mansion. So I'm sure they could have found another room for Delta if they wanted to. So what's happening here? Well, it's the generosity and the caring devotion of Minnie Mae, who I'm sure, as Grandma and Dodger, could have demanded of Elvis that Delta be given her own room and that no one share a room with Minnie Mae. So this has to be Minnie Mae's decision, that she's sharing this room with her daughter in a gesture of ritual care, embodying a reminder that even within this mythic sprawl of Graceland, love is measured not in square footage, but in proximity. And her shared quarters become a sanctuary, a hearth within the palace. Minnie Mae is telling her daughter Delta, who she knows hurts so much at this moment, that her grief is not to be endured alone. They're going to share it together in one small room of this great big mansion. And so Minnie Mae, she anchors this myth that we're looking at of Elvis and the amazing things he did and the Circle G. But through it all, Minnie Mae's there. And she's not part of the spectacle. She's just the quiet, enduring grace behind the story. And Terry's saying that Gary Pepper died of pneumonia in 1980 at the age of 48. And then his extensive collection of memorabilia was later sold at auction. There was a legal dispute. Thank you, Terry. That's exactly the way that I remember it. And Pat is saying, why is Dodger not at Graceland? She's family. She is at Graceland. She's sharing her room with Delta because Elvis has brought Delta to Graceland after the death of Uncle Pat. They were down south. He sent Marty Lacker and another guy to go pick up Delta and everything she owned. Which wasn't a whole lot because Delta and Pat moved around from place to place a lot. And he brought her back. Marty brought Delta back to Graceland. And so this just happened. This happened this month, January 1967. And that's what Gary's reporting on, that this just happened. And the first place that Delta stays within the mansion is inside Dodger's room. Dodger's name is also Minnie Mae. She's Minnie Mae Presley. And Sonny West, he says that when he returned to Graceland in February 1967, after filming a movie called The Hellcats, the place looked like Gene Autry's Melody Ranch. So what he's saying there is Gene Autry was a famous cowboy. I believe he was called the Singing Cowboy. And the Melody Ranch would have been familiar to people who watched films of Gene Autry. So it was a Western place. He's trying to say that it was very Western setting at this point. But we also learned from that line that Sonny was not around. Probably not through Christmas. He was off filming some film called The Hellcats, non-Elvis related. So that means he would have left Elvis employment for that period of time. So I've tried to point out before, and I should probably point it out a lot, that nobody was able to share Elvis's journey with him the entire way. Nobody could keep up with him. So even Sonny, who was hired since 1960, and he'll tell you, hey, I was with Elvis for 15 years. True, but there were breaks, like this one, where he wasn't around. Right? Because he'd been off doing his own thing. And how did Elvis feel about that? Well, Sonny says that Elvis looked at him and he said, you should have stuck around after the holidays. I bought everyone a horse. So Sonny says, I told him I didn't need one, but he insisted. And in short order, I had my own golden palomino called Willie. So Elvis chastises Sonny slightly for going to do his own thing, which these guys, they like to do a lot, to go do their own thing. And I think Elvis took that as a slap in the face, that he wasn't caring for them well enough. They were telling him he wasn't giving them enough money, but they were willing to come back and go ahead and continue to take his money between these jobs. And so I think that irritated Elvis. Jerry did it. Charlie did it. Red did it. Joe did it. And then they would come up with these other schemes and stuff too, especially during these movie years, to increase the amount of money in their own pockets. And obviously, that was very obvious to Elvis. And so here he's saying, Sonny, I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying, which is this horse is worth more money than you could have possibly made while you were doing this movie, which has got to be true because the horse is very expensive. We've looked at that earlier. A Palomino, like Elvis's, they were saying was $3,500, which was $30,000 today, right? This was not a cheap hobby. Sonny probably didn't get paid that for whatever he did in this movie. So he actually would have lost money, except that Elvis didn't let him lose. And he still bought him the Palomino. Now, I don't know if that means they owned the horses and then Sonny could have sold it later or whatever, but I do know Sonny owns horses at a later time. And maybe it all started right here when he got this first horse from Elvis. And then they got to go out onto the Circle G. And then Sonny's got some more stories to tell us. But unfortunately, we're out of time today. And we still didn't make it to the Circle G, but we're starting to understand why Elvis needed to buy it. It wasn't just about some of the things we've looked at before. He's got a bunch of people he's bought these horses for, and Graceland just isn't big enough for it anymore. So it's growing out of a hobby that he's now going to be able to use to kind of get back some control in his life that he maybe lost through the January 2nd contract that took effect, where the Colonel's now making 50% of some of the money. And we're not exactly sure how Elvis felt about it, but we do see Elvis is doing a lot of purchases. But he's doing a lot of giving too, doing a lot of good things. And we saw yesterday that the city of Memphis has renamed during this period the Coliseum to the Elvis Presley Coliseum. And that's got to make him feel pretty good. But before we get out of here for today, I'm going to play the song that I wrote about Donna Presley's experiences here on the ranch, which I've called He Gave Us Everything. You all keep on taking care of business.
17, snow on the ground, Circle G, love all around. He bought that ranch, opened the gate, said come on in, let's celebrate. Tractor pulling through the snow, laughter rising, spirits glow. Both behind, wives and men, family fun again and again. He wasn't just a star in lights, he was the warmth in winter nights. Kindness wrapped in velvet flame, a heart that never played the fame. He gave us joy, he gave us grace, a piano song in a quiet place. From a jack to a king, in the moonlight ring, he gave us love, he gave us wings. Circle G, where the angels sing. He gave us everything. Riding horses, lakes so still, bridge and cross on the quiet hill. Barbecue smoke, stories told, moments more precious than gold. He'd ask me who I'm dating now, what I dream, what I'll allow. He cared like kin, not just a name. He lived for love, not for acclaim. He wasn't just a voice on stage, he was the soul behind the page. A man who'd sing to heal your day and laugh the midnight blues away. He gave us joy, he gave us grace, a piano song in a quiet place. From a jack to a king, in the moonlight ring, he gave us love, he gave us grace. everything.